I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed. It was a Tuesday evening in April, the kind where spring was just starting to show itself in Boston. The cherry trees on our street in Somerville were beginning to bloom, but I didn't notice them when I walked home that day. My mind was somewhere else entirely, calculating how much more I needed to save for my NYU tuition deposit due next month. For nearly 6 years, I'd worked every job I could get my hands on. Stocking shelves at Mike's Market on weekends, tutoring middle schoolers after classes, shoveling driveways in winter, mowing lawns in summer. Every dollar went straight into my college fund. My friends thought I was crazy for working so hard while still in high school, but they didn't understand what it meant to me. NYU's business program was my ticket out, my chance to build something bigger than this 3-bedroom colonial my parents had been slowly drowning in debt to keep. When I walked into our kitchen that evening, Mom was making lasagna, my favorite. Dad was already seated at the table, nursing a beer. My brother Kevin sat across from him, eyes downcast, leg bouncing nervously under the table. Something felt off immediately. "Hey, sit down, Emily," Dad said, his voice softer than usual. "We need to talk about something important." I remember setting my backpack down slowly, a knot forming in my stomach. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and joined us, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. "It's about your college fund," Dad continued, clearing his throat. "We've had to make a difficult decision." The next few minutes played out like some kind of surreal nightmare. Kevin, my 24-year-old brother who dropped out of community college 3 years earlier, had racked up gambling debts, serious ones. Apparently, he'd gotten mixed up with some people in Charlestown who weren't the forgiving type. They'd started making threats. "We had to protect him," Mom said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. "They were talking about breaking his legs, Emily. What were we supposed to do?" "So you gave them my college fund?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm, too hollow. Dad nodded slowly. "All of it. $22,418.17. The precision of that number hit me like a physical blow. Every overtime shift. Every birthday check from Grandma. Every time I'd said no to movies with friends because I needed that $8 for my future. All of it, gone. "Kevin's going to pay you back," Mom added quickly. "He's got a job interview next week at the hardware store." I looked at my brother then. Kevin had always been the family favorite, the handsome, charming son who could talk his way out of anything. He'd been just about to turn things around for as long as I could remember. Now he sat there, shoulders hunched, mumbling about how sorry he was, how he'd make it right. "The community college has some great programs," Dad offered. "And you can live at home, save on room and board. Plenty of successful people start there." I felt something break inside me then. Not just disappointment, something deeper. Trust, maybe. Or the belief that if you worked hard enough, played by the rules, you'd get what you deserved. "You'll understand one day," Mom said, patting my hand like I was still a child. "Family supports family. When you're older, you'll see we did the right thing." I didn't argue. Didn't scream. Didn't flip the table like I wanted to. I just nodded, excused myself, and went upstairs to my bedroom. I lay awake all night, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on my ceiling when I was 9 back when I thought the universe made sense. By morning, I'd made my decision. I emptied my sock drawer of the emergency cash I kept there, $75. I packed my backpack with 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, phone charger, and the copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad my economics teacher Mr. Abernathy had given me. I wrote a short note, "Gone to find my own way. Don't look for me." I left before anyone else was awake. The cherry blossoms were fully visible now in the early morning light. Our neighbor Mrs. Donovan was walking her corgi and waved to me. I waved back, wondering if she'd be the last familiar face I'd see for a while. At the bus station, I bought a ticket for New York with no real plan beyond getting there. If I couldn't attend NYU as a student, I'd go there anyway. Find work. Figure something out. The city had 8 million people. Surely one of them would give me a chance. As the bus pulled away from Boston, I didn't feel sad exactly. I felt empty. And somewhere beneath that emptiness was a small, hard kernel of determination. If my own family didn't believe in me, I'd have to become someone they couldn't ignore. Someone they'd regret underestimating. I didn't know then how I'd do it. I just knew I would. The girl who left home that morning with $75 and a backpack full of crushed dreams wouldn't be the same person who returned, if I ever returned at all. New York City swallowed me whole that first day. I'd visited once on a school trip, but being a tourist and being homeless were entirely different experiences. The city didn't care that I'd had a 4.0 GPA or that I could recite financial formulas from memory. It saw only another desperate face among thousands. I spent my first 3 nights in a youth hostel in Chinatown, sharing a room with 4 international travelers who were too busy taking selfies on the Brooklyn Bridge to notice the American girl who cried silently into her pillowcase each night. By day 4, my funds were dangerously low, and I needed to find work fast. I walked until my feet blistered, going into every restaurant, store, and coffee shop I passed. Most places wanted experience or wouldn't hire someone without a permanent address. By sunset, I'd been rejected 27 times, and the weight of what I'd done began to crush me. I sat on a bench in Washington Square Park watching NYU students stroll past, students whose lives I should have been living, and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. That's when I smelled it: bacon, burgers, and grease. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since morning. I followed the scent to a 24-hour diner called Reggie's tucked away on a side street in the village. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, and the windows were fogged with decades of cooking steam. It wasn't much, but it was warm. I spent my last $12 on a cheeseburger and coffee, making them last as long as possible. When midnight came, the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Trish with faded tattoos and tired eyes, dropped the check and mentioned that they were short-handed since one of their dishwashers had quit. "Owner's in the back," she said, nodding toward the kitchen. "He's a grouch, but he pays cash weekly." Reggie Green wasn't what I expected. In his 70s, with dark skin weathered by years in hot kitchens, he looked me up and down with the kind of assessment that sees past appearances to something deeper. "Why should I hire you?" he asked, not bothering with formalities. "You look like you should be in college, not washing dishes at 1 a.m. I told him the truth, most of it anyway. That I'd left home, needed work, and wouldn't complain about hours or conditions. I didn't mention my family or my savings. Those wounds were still too fresh. "You got hard eyes," he said finally. "Seen that look before. Usually means someone's running from something." He tossed me an apron. "Shift ends at 8 a.m. Don't steal. Don't be late. Don't bring your problems through that door." That first shift nearly broke me. My hands cracked and bled from the industrial-strength soap and scalding water. My back screamed from bending over the deep sinks. By morning, I could barely straighten my fingers, but I'd earned $50 and the promise of more shifts. Trish helped me find a room to rent in her cousin's basement in Queens, a windowless space with a mattress on the floor and a bathroom shared with 2 other tenants. It was a 90-minute subway ride to the diner, but it was shelter. I paid 2 weeks' rent up front and collapsed into dreamless sleep. The next few months blur together in my memory. I worked doubles whenever possible, 16 hours of dishes, mopping, and prepping vegetables. I learned to sleep on the subway, standing up if necessary, catching minutes of rest between stations. I showered at the 24-hour gym where I'd scraped together enough for the cheapest membership, mostly so I'd have reliable bathroom access. When I wasn't working, I haunted the New York Public Library. I couldn't afford books, but I could sit in the Rose reading room for hours, devouring everything I could about business, finance, and entrepreneurship. I took free online courses using the library's computers. I filled notebooks with ideas, plans, and calculations. I was exhausted but focused in a way I'd never been before. I made exactly one friend during those months, Dante, the night cook at Reggie's. A community college dropout with a genius for both line cooking and computer repair, he noticed me reading investment books during my breaks. "You don't strike me as the Gordon Gekko type," he said one night, sliding a plate of leftovers toward me that I hadn't ordered but desperately needed. "I'm not interested in greed," I replied. "I'm interested in freedom." After that, we started talking. He taught me how computers really worked, beyond the user interface. I showed him what I was learning about market trends and investment strategies. We were both outsiders, both hungry for something beyond our current circumstances. There were moments of pure despair, too. Like when my laptop died, taking with it all my notes and plans. Or the night I got mugged walking back from a late shift, losing a week's pay and my Metro card. Or when I developed bronchitis but couldn't afford to miss work, so I stuffed myself with drugstore medicine and worked through fevers that left me hallucinating by the end of my shifts. I called home exactly once, 3 months after leaving. My mother answered, her voice shifting from casual to frantic when she realized it was me. "Emily, where are you? We've been worried sick." "The police said I'm fine." I cut her off. "I just wanted you to know I'm alive. Don't try to find me. Please come home," she said, her voice breaking. "We can figure something out for college." "Kevin's really sorry," I hung up, then turned off my phone entirely. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I certainly wasn't ready to return to being the family member whose dreams could be sacrificed. 6 months into my new life, something unexpected happened. Reggie called me into his office, actually just a converted storage closet with a desk squeezed inside. I thought I was getting fired. Instead, he handed me an envelope. "Trish is leaving. Moving to Florida with her boyfriend. Need a new floor manager. Hours are better, pays a bit more. You want it?" It wasn't much, $1.50 more per hour, but it was recognition. A small step up. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something like hope. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "I won't let you down." Reggie just nodded. "I know. That's why I'm asking you. Now get back to work. Those dishes won't wash themselves." I walked out of his office with my head a little higher. The girl who'd arrived in New York with nothing was still there, somewhere beneath the calluses and exhaustion. But now she had something that couldn't be taken away. She had proven, to herself at least, that she could survive. My life changed direction on a Tuesday morning trash run. I was hauling garbage bags to the dumpster behind Reggie's when I spotted it, a laptop sitting atop a pile of discarded furniture from the apartment building next door. It was an older MacBook Pro with a cracked screen and missing keys, but something told me it wasn't beyond saving. I tucked it under my arm without a second thought. That evening, I showed my find to Dante. "Think it's fixable?" He turned it over in his hands, examining it with the focus he usually reserved for perfecting his signature chili. "Battery's shot. Screen needs replacing. Probably needs a new hard drive. But yeah, it's fixable." "Why?" "I've been thinking," I said, choosing my words carefully. "There's money in fixing things people throw away." Dante raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about dumpster diving?" "I'm talking about seeing value where others don't." The next day, I withdrew $100 from my meager savings, money I'd been putting aside for a real apartment someday, and bought replacement parts from a computer supply store in Chinatown that Dante recommended. For 3 nights straight, we huddled in my basement room after our shifts, Dante guiding me through the repair process, teaching me which components could be salvaged and which needed replacing. When we finally powered it up and saw the Apple logo glowing on the screen, I felt a rush of satisfaction unlike anything I'd experienced at the diner. This was creation, not just survival. I listed the refurbished laptop on eBay and sold it for $340. After paying Dante $50 for his help and accounting for my costs, I'd made nearly $200 profit. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it represented something crucial, a model that could be repeated and scaled. I began spending my days off hunting for discarded electronics. Soon my tiny basement room resembled a tech hospital, with various devices in different stages of repair spread across every surface. I taught myself to fix phones with cracked screens, tablets with water damage, gaming consoles with overheated motherboards. YouTube became my university and forums my textbooks. 3 months in, I had enough steady business to cut back to part-time at the diner. I registered my business, Phoenix Tech Repair, and built a simple website offering pickup and delivery in Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn. Soon I was fixing devices for busy professionals who didn't have time to wait at the Apple Store and students who couldn't afford their prices. Dante joined me full-time 6 months later. We rented a small storefront in Astoria, Queens, nothing fancy, just a former dry cleaners with good wiring and cheap rent. We hired Luis, a busboy from Reggie's who turned out to have an uncanny talent for microsoldering. The three of us worked 14-hour days, but for the first time, I was building something that was truly mine. Our big break came when Dante fixed a particularly damaged MacBook Air belonging to a venture capitalist named Jordan Mercer. It had been run over by a taxi, and 3 repair shops had declared it unsalvageable. Dante not only recovered all the data, but got the machine running again. Jordan was impressed enough to ask about our business model. After hearing my story, an edited version that omitted my family, he invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant in Tribeca. I showed up in the nicest clothes I owned, still embarrassingly casual for the setting, with a notebook full of numbers and projections. "You've built something interesting," he said, studying me over steepled fingers. "But you're thinking too small. Repair is a service business with limited scaling potential. What else could you do with your knowledge of electronics and your eye for value?" That conversation changed everything. With Jordan's guidance and a modest $50,000 investment, in exchange for 15% equity, we expanded beyond repairs into refurbished electronic sales. We developed a proprietary system for evaluating, restoring, and certifying used devices, then selling them with warranties. We called our new venture Phoenix Tech Certified. The timing was perfect. The economy was still recovering from a recession, and consumers were looking for reliable technology at reduced prices. We partnered with small businesses to handle their electronic waste, paying them for devices we could refurbish and properly recycling the rest. We built relationships with schools and nonprofits, providing affordable technology packages for underprivileged students. 2 years after finding that first laptop in the trash, we had 3 storefronts across New York City, an e-commerce platform that shipped nationwide, and 37 employees. Many hired from Reggie's and similar businesses that attracted hardworking people who needed a second chance. I finally moved out of my basement room into a modest but comfortable 1-bedroom apartment in Sunnyside. I bought actual furniture. I opened a retirement account. Small luxuries that felt monumental after my years of struggle. Jordan introduced me to his network of investors and entrepreneurs. I soaked up knowledge from everyone I met, asking questions, studying business models, learning from both successes and failures. I took night classes at NYU, not as a full-time student as I'd once dreamed, but through their continuing education program. The irony wasn't lost on me. When an opportunity arose to acquire a software company that specialized in diagnostic tools for electronic repair, I took it. The acquisition stretched our finances thin, but it gave us proprietary technology that no competitor could match. We integrated their software with our hardware expertise and launched a suite of professional tools for independent repair shops. By year 4, Phoenix Technologies, we'd rebranded to reflect our expanding focus, was generating $12 million in annual revenue. I raised a Series A round of funding $4 million at a $25 million valuation and used it to expand nationally. We opened regional refurbishment centers in Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas. We developed an app that let customers diagnose their device issues before sending them in for repair. When tech publications began writing about the circular economy in electronics, we were positioned as pioneers. I gave my first public speech at a technology conference in San Francisco, sharing our vision for reducing electronic waste while creating jobs and making technology accessible to all. The standing ovation caught me off guard. I was still the girl from Somerville in my mind, just trying to prove herself. By year 5, acquisition offers started coming in. A major electronics retailer wanted to buy us for $38 million. A Silicon Valley giant offered $42 million. I declined them all. This wasn't just a business to me, it was vindication. Proof that I had been worth believing in. I diversified my personal investments, putting money into promising startups, real estate in emerging markets, and blue-chip stocks. I studied markets obsessively, developing an instinct for trends and opportunities that my formal education might never have taught me. By my 26th birthday, my net worth had crossed $50 million on paper. Jordan encouraged me to start a small venture fund focused on founders from unconventional backgrounds. We called it Phoenix Capital and invested in entrepreneurs who had demonstrated resilience and resourcefulness over pedigree. Our first cohort included a former homeless veteran who'd developed an app for emergency housing, a single mother who'd created an innovative childcare cooperative model, and 2 community college dropouts with a breakthrough battery technology. As my wealth grew, I maintained a low profile. No flashy cars or mansions. No social media presence. No profiles in business magazines. I changed my last name legally, not out of shame, but to create distance from my past. My employees knew me simply as M, the founder who still occasionally fixed devices alongside them when things got busy. Sometimes, late at night in my now comfortable but still modest apartment, I would think about how far I'd come from that morning with $75 in my pocket. I thought about Reggie, who'd given me my first real chance, and who now owned a significantly upgraded diner thanks to a small business grant he'd mysteriously received. I thought about the library where I'd educated myself. And yes, I thought about my family, wondering if they ever looked for me, if they ever regretted what they'd done. But those thoughts never lingered long. I had built something from nothing. Something that created jobs, solved problems, and grew more valuable each day. The past was prologue, interesting perhaps, but not as compelling as what came next. 7 years after leaving home, I rarely thought about my past life. Phoenix Ventures, the investment firm I'd founded after selling controlling interest in Phoenix Technologies, had become my all-consuming focus. We specialized in turnarounds, identifying struggling but viable companies, providing capital and operational expertise, then either helping them become profitable again or facilitating strategic acquisitions. I had developed a reputation for seeing potential where others saw only failure. My office occupied the 32nd floor of a sleek midtown tower with views of Central Park. That particular morning in October, I was reviewing investment proposals with my chief analyst, Serena Wilson. A former Wall Street quant who'd grown disillusioned with the banking world, Serena had an uncanny ability to spot hidden weaknesses in balance sheets and operational reports. "This one's interesting," she said, sliding a folder across my desk. Mid-sized logistics company out of Massachusetts. They've got solid fundamentals, good customer base, but terrible cash flow management. They're headed for Chapter 11 unless they get an infusion of capital and new leadership. I flipped open the folder and froze. Staring back at me was a name I hadn't seen in years, Marshall Logistics. My parents' company. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I set the folder down carefully, hoping Serena wouldn't notice the tremor in my hands. "What's the ask?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. $15 million for 20% equity and 3 board seats, she replied. Standard restructuring provisions. They need an answer within 2 weeks. She tilted her head, studying me. "You okay, Em? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," I lied. "Let me review this one personally. Could you give me the room?" After she left, I spread the documents across my desk. Marshall Logistics had expanded considerably since I'd left home. What had once been a regional trucking operation now handled supply chain management for clients across the Northeast. They had warehouses in 5 states, a fleet of 80 trucks, and just over 200 employees. But the financials told a different story. Their debt-to-equity ratio was dangerously high. They'd been late on loan payments for 3 consecutive quarters. Their fuel hedging strategy was practically non-existent, leaving them vulnerable to price fluctuations. And their workforce turnover rate suggested serious management issues. I dug deeper, scanning the executive profiles. My father, Richard Marshall, was still CEO. My mother, Diane, was listed as Chief Administrative Officer. And there was Kevin, my brother, as Chief Financial Officer, despite having no formal financial education or relevant experience before joining the company. I pulled up their latest tax filings, quarterly reports, and credit history. The picture grew clearer and more troubling. They had mortgaged everything to fuel expansion without securing enough long-term contracts to justify the growth. Classic overextension. And there were troubling signs of financial mismanagement, unexplained cash withdrawals, inconsistent accounting practices, payments to entities that seemed to exist only on paper. Kevin's work, undoubtedly. Some habits never change. I closed the folder and walked to the window, gazing out at the city that had both broken and remade me. 7 years of silence. 7 years of building a new identity, a new life. 7 years of proving to myself that I didn't need them, that I could succeed not just despite them, but because of what they'd taught me about self-reliance. And now here they were, unwittingly asking for my help. My assistant buzzed the intercom. "Miss Phoenix, your 3 o'clock with Westbrook Technologies is waiting in the conference room." "I'll be right there," I replied automatically, my mind still processing this unexpected collision of past and present. Throughout the meeting, I smiled, nodded, asked appropriate questions. But my thoughts kept returning to that folder on my desk. Part of me wanted to reject the proposal outright. Let them fail. Let them face the consequences of their poor decisions, just as they'd forced me to face the aftermath of their betrayal. But another part, the part that had transformed me from a dishwasher into the founder of a $200 million investment firm, saw an opportunity. Not for revenge, but for something more complex, closure, perhaps. Or vindication. That evening, I stayed late, reading every document, analyzing every number. I had Serena pull additional information, employee reviews on job sites, Better Business Bureau complaints, local news coverage. I wanted the complete picture. What emerged was a company in far deeper trouble than even the initial proposal suggested. Marshall Logistics was perhaps 3 months from complete collapse. Their employees' jobs, their clients' supply chains, their vendors' payments, all hanging by an increasingly frayed thread. At midnight, I called Jordan Mercer, the venture capitalist who'd become both mentor and friend since our first meeting years ago. "I need your honest opinion on something," I said after explaining the situation, omitting only my personal connection to the company. "Objectively speaking, is it a good investment?" he asked. "The company itself has potential. Their client list is strong. Their terminal locations are strategically valuable. With the right management and financial controls, they could be turned around. But there are signs of potential fraud in their accounting. Nothing definitive, but enough red flags to warrant serious concerns." Jordan was silent for a moment. "You've built your reputation on seeing value others miss and making tough, unsentimental decisions. What's different about this one?" I hesitated, then told him the truth. All of it. My family. The stolen college fund. My escape and reinvention. The bizarre coincidence that had brought my parents' company to my desk. When I finished, Jordan let out a low whistle. "Hell of a story, Em. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to walk away. Part of me wants to help. There are 200 employees who didn't do anything wrong. And part of me." I trailed off. "Wants them to know exactly who's deciding their fate," Jordan finished for me. "Is that petty?" "It's human," he said simply. "But remember something important. Whatever you decide, do it because it makes business sense, not emotional sense. You didn't get where you are by making decisions with your heart." After we hung up, I sat alone in my office, watching the city lights below. The scared, angry girl who'd left home with $75 wanted revenge, wanted to see the shock and shame on their faces when they realized who I'd become. But the businesswoman I'd transformed into recognized that personal vendettas made for poor investment strategies. 2 days later, I made my decision. I would meet with them, face to face, before deciding whether to invest. No intermediaries. No advance warning of who I was. Just me, sitting across the table, evaluating their business and their character simultaneously. I instructed my team to schedule a meeting at Marshall Logistics headquarters in Somerville. Tell them the head of Phoenix Ventures insists on meeting the executive team personally before committing to any investment. Should I prepare the standard due diligence team? Serena asked. No, I replied. I'll handle this one personally. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. As I boarded my company's private jet at Teterboro Airport, I felt strangely calm. 7 years of silence were about to end. Whatever happened next, I would be the one in control this time. The Marshall Logistics headquarters looked different than I remembered. What had once been a small office attached to a warehouse had expanded into a modern 3-story building with a glass front entrance and professionally landscaped grounds. A far cry from the modest operation my father had run when I was growing up. I sat in the back of a black Suburban, watching employees stream through the front doors. My driver, a retired NYPD detective named Ray who handled security for all my business trips, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "We're 20 minutes early, Miss Phoenix. Would you like to get coffee before the meeting?" "No," I replied, my eyes fixed on the building. "Let's go in now. I'd like to walk the facility before the meeting." I deliberately dressed to project authority. A charcoal gray Armani suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. My appearance had changed considerably over the years. The scared teenager with faded jeans and untamed hair was long gone, replaced by a woman whose every detail projected calm confidence and understated power. As I walked through the front doors, a receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Marshall Logistics. How may I help you?" "Emily Phoenix, Phoenix Ventures. I have a 10 o'clock with Richard Marshall and his executive team." Her eyes widened slightly at the name. "Of course, Miss Phoenix. They're expecting you. Would you like to go straight to the boardroom?" "Actually, I'd prefer a quick tour first. Is someone available to show me around?" Minutes later, I was walking through the warehouse with a nervous operations manager named Tim Donovan. He pointed out their inventory management system, their fleet maintenance area, their dispatch center. I asked pointed questions about turnover rates, equipment reliability, safety protocols. Tim answered candidly, occasionally revealing more problems than their official documents had suggested. "And how's morale?" I asked as we passed a break room where several drivers were having coffee. Tim hesitated. "It's been better. There have been some delayed paychecks recently. Just by a day or two," he added quickly. "And the health insurance switched to a plan with higher deductibles last quarter. People understand business is tough right now, but..." He trailed off. "But they're worried," I finished for him. He nodded. "We've lost some good people. Word gets around in this industry." By the time we reached the boardroom, I had a much clearer picture of the company's operational reality. The executive summary had painted things too optimistically. They weren't 3 months from collapse, they were 6 weeks at most. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. My father sat at the head of the table, gray hair now completely white, face more deeply lined than I remembered. My mother sat to his right, still elegant but visibly tense. Kevin was to his left, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the softness around his middle, his once handsome face now puffy and marked by the signs of hard living. None of them recognized me immediately. Why would they? The Emily they knew had vanished 7 years ago. "Miss Phoenix," my father said, rising to extend his hand. "Thank you for coming personally. I'm Richard Marshall. This is my wife Diane, our CFO Kevin Marshall, and our operations director Marcus Whitley." I shook each hand firmly, keeping my expression neutral. My mother's perfume was the same as I remembered, Chanel No. 5, and the familiar scent triggered a cascade of memories I quickly suppressed. "Please sit," I said, taking control of the meeting immediately. "I've reviewed your proposal and just completed a walkthrough of your facility. I have some questions before we discuss potential investment." For the next 30 minutes, I led them through a methodical dissection of their business. I questioned their expansion decisions, their debt structure, their client retention strategies. I challenged Kevin directly on several accounting practices, watching him squirm as he tried to explain away discrepancies. I asked my mother about employee turnover and watched her glance nervously at my father before answering. None of them had connected the dots yet. To them, I was just another intimidating investor, younger than they expected perhaps, more incisive in my questioning, but still just a potential lifeline for their failing company. It was when I asked about their contingency plans that my father finally paused, looking at me more closely. "There's something familiar about you," he said slowly. "Have we met before?" I set down my pen and met his gaze directly. Yes, Richard. We have. The room went silent. My mother leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied my face. Kevin stared blankly, still not making the connection. Emily? My mother's voice was barely above a whisper. Emily, is that you? I didn't answer immediately, letting the moment stretch, watching the realization dawn on each of their faces. My father's complexion paled. Kevin's mouth opened slightly in shock. My mother's hand flew to her throat. That's not possible, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was already seeing it, the shape of my eyes, the set of my jaw. Features that makeup and time could alter, but never completely disguise. It's been a long time, I said simply. 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days, to be precise. My God, Kevin muttered. Emily. Actually, it's Emily Phoenix now. I had my name legally changed. My mother half rose from her chair, as if to come around the table toward me, but I held up a hand to stop her. This is a business meeting. Let's keep it professional. She sank back down, tears welling in her eyes. We thought you were dead, she said. After the first year, when the police couldn't find any trace of you, some of them suggested that I might have met with foul play. I finished for her. No, I was very much alive. Working, building something from nothing. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice on those last words. My father seemed to recover some of his composure. Emily, Miss Phoenix, this is quite a shock. We never imagined that I'd amount to anything significant. I kept my tone even, or that I'd end up being the person deciding whether your company survives. Kevin leaned forward, his salesman's instincts overriding his shock. Emily, this is incredible. You've obviously done well for yourself. And now, fate has brought us back together. We're family, after all. Surely that counts for something. The naked opportunism in his voice made my stomach turn. 7 years, and he hadn't changed at all. Still looking for the angle, the easy way out. Family, I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Let's talk about family, Kevin. Let's talk about how you gambled away my college fund. How Dad and Mom gave you my future to cover your debts. How you promised to pay it back, a promise you clearly never intended to keep. Kevin's face reddened. That was a long time ago. I was in trouble, and now you're in trouble again. I cut him off. Except this time, you've dragged 200 employees down with you. I turned to my father. I've seen the books, Richard. The unexplained cash transfers. The phantom vendors. The accounting irregularities. It all has Kevin's fingerprints all over it. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Business has been difficult. We've had to make some creative financial arrangements to stay afloat. Creative? Is that what we're calling embezzlement these days? My mother gasped. Emily, that's not fair. Your brother has worked very hard. Save it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I took a breath, regaining my composure. I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here to decide whether Phoenix Ventures will invest $15 million in your company. A tense silence filled the room. Marcus Whitley, the operations director who had remained quiet throughout this family drama, cleared his throat. Perhaps I should give your family some privacy. That won't be necessary, I said. I've seen everything I need to see. I closed my portfolio and stood. I'll be in touch with my decision by the end of the week. Emily, wait, my father said, standing quickly. Can't we talk? As a family? There's so much to say, so much time to make up for. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in 7 years. The powerful father figure who had once dominated my world now seemed smaller somehow. Older. Uncertain. I have a car waiting, I said, moving toward the door. And to be clear, if I decide to invest in Marshall Logistics, it won't be as a daughter. It will be as a businesswoman making a calculated decision about an underperforming asset. Kevin's face darkened. You always were cold, Emily. Even as a kid. Always calculating, always keeping score. I turned to him, allowing myself a small, tight smile. Not cold, Kevin. Just clear-eyed. Something this company could have used in its CFO. As I reached the door, my mother called after me. Emily, please. We looked for you. We hired private investigators. We never stopped hoping. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "I'll be in touch with my decision," I repeated without turning around. Then I walked out, my heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, leaving stunned silence in my wake. In the car, Ray watched me in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay, boss?" I gazed out the window at the building that housed so many ghosts from my past. "Fine," I said. "Take me back to the hotel. I have some thinking to do." That night in my hotel room, I stood at the window overlooking Boston, the city where I'd grown up, where I'd once had dreams that were stolen from me. The girl who'd left with $75 in her pocket had returned as a woman who could write a check for $15 million without blinking. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt hollow, a victory with no joy in it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. "Decision made?" I typed back a single word. "Almost." I spent the next 3 days in Boston, conducting proper due diligence on Marshall Logistics. I interviewed employees, examined contracts, and scrutinized financial records. Every discovery confirmed my initial assessment. The company had solid fundamentals buried under catastrophic leadership and financial mismanagement. With the right restructuring, it could be saved, but not with the current executive team intact. On my last evening in the city, I walked through Somerville, past the colonial house where I'd grown up. New paint, new landscaping, but essentially unchanged. I stood across the street for a long moment, remembering the night I'd left, the weight of betrayal still fresh. A woman came out onto the porch, not my mother, some stranger who now called my childhood home her own, and gave me a curious look. I nodded politely and continued walking. Boston had never felt like mine again after that night. New York, with its relentless energy and indifference to my past, had become home. I belonged to the city that had both broken and rebuilt me, not to this place of faded memories and first wounds. Back at my hotel, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Serena. "I need you to contact Northeast Freight Solutions," I said. "Tell them I want to discuss a potential acquisition target." "Marshall Logistics?" she asked. "You want them to acquire it?" "Yes. Draft a preliminary term sheet. We'll offer to facilitate a structured acquisition with Phoenix Ventures providing bridge financing. The current management team will be removed as a condition of the deal." My second call was to my father. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "Privately. Not at your office." We met at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, neutral territory. He arrived first, already nursing a scotch, looking like he'd aged years in the days since our meeting. I took the seat across from him, declining a drink when the waiter approached. "I'm not investing in Marshall Logistics," I said without preamble. He nodded slowly, unsurprised. "I figured as much. Too personal, too messy." "It's not about personal feelings," I replied. "It's about numbers. Your company is too far gone for a simple cash infusion to fix. The structural problems run deeper than your proposal acknowledged." He stared into his drink. "So that's it then. We file for bankruptcy next week. 200 people lose their jobs. The Marshall name becomes synonymous with failure." He looked up at me. "Is that what you wanted to see?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "I've arranged an acquisition by Northeast Freight. They'll absorb most of your operations, retain roughly 70% of your workforce. The Marshall name will disappear, but the company's core functions will survive." Relief flooded his face, followed quickly by suspicion. "What's the catch?" "The entire executive team will be replaced. You, Mom, Kevin, all of you will be out. No golden parachutes, no consulting roles. Clean break." He took a long swallow of his scotch. "Kevin's facing gambling charges in Connecticut. Did you know that? He's been using company funds again. Your mother and I have been trying to cover for him, trying to hold everything together until we could secure new investment." "I know," I said quietly. "The Connecticut DA contacted me yesterday after hearing about my interest in the company. I've seen the preliminary charges." My father looked suddenly older, defeated. "We failed him. And we failed you. I see that now." I didn't contradict him. The silence stretched between us, filled with 7 years of absence and a lifetime of complicated history. "Can I ask," he finally said, "what happened to you after you left? Where did you go? How did you?" He gestured vaguely at my tailored suit, my evident success. So I told him. Not everything, not the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in my basement room, not the times I'd been so hungry I'd eaten discarded food from restaurant dumpsters. But I told him about Reggie's Diner, about fixing that first laptop, about building Phoenix Technologies, and eventually Phoenix Ventures. I kept my tone matter-of-fact, neither minimizing the struggle nor dramatizing the triumph. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You did all that on your own," he finally said. While we were bailing Kevin out again and again. "I did what I had to do," I replied. "Just like you did what you thought you had to do." "No," he shook his head firmly. "Don't let me off the hook. What we did to you is wrong. Inexcusable. I've had 7 years to think about it, to wonder where you were, if you were even alive. To regret." His voice cracked slightly. To regret that moment every single day. I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of something like closure. "The acquisition papers will be delivered tomorrow," I said, standing to leave. "You should sign them. It's the best outcome possible at this point." "Emily," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. I let him take it, feeling the calluses that matched my own, hands that had built things, failed at things, tried again. "Will we see you again? Your mother asks about you every day, even now. She keeps your room exactly as it was." I gently withdrew my hand. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm not the same person who left. And you're not the same parents I left behind. But you're still our daughter," he said softly. "I'm Emily Phoenix now," I replied. "The girl you knew is gone." As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, I doubted that would ever be possible, but unburdened from something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. 2 weeks later, I watched from my Manhattan office as the acquisition of Marshall Logistics was finalized. Northeast Freight had moved quickly, recognizing the strategic value in the company's locations and client roster. Kevin had been arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. My parents had signed over their equity and stepped away quietly. Of the 200 employees, 147 had kept their jobs. I never spoke to my mother or Kevin again. My father sent one email about a year later, just a few lines saying he was working as a consultant in the transportation industry, that he and my mother had downsized to a condo, that he hoped I was well. I didn't reply, but I didn't block his address either. Life continued its forward momentum. Phoenix Ventures grew to become one of the most respected middle-market investment firms in the country. I expanded our focus to include technology startups and renewable energy companies. My personal net worth crossed into the billions, though I maintained my relatively modest lifestyle and continued to avoid publicity. On rare occasions, usually late at night after a particularly successful deal or challenging negotiation, I would think about that day in the Marshall Logistics boardroom, about the looks on their faces when they realized who I was. There was no joy in the memory, no satisfaction in their downfall. That wasn't why I'd done it. I hadn't saved their company to prove a point. I hadn't arranged its acquisition out of spite. I'd simply made the same calculation I made with every business decision: what creates the most value with the resources available? In this case, salvation through acquisition was the right answer, even if it meant the end of the Marshall name. Some people might call that cold. I call it clarity. 5 years after the Marshall Logistics acquisition, I received an unexpected package at my office. Inside was a small wooden box I recognized immediately, a jewelry box that had sat on my dresser throughout my childhood. With it was a note in my mother's handwriting: "These always belong to you." "Mom," the box contained my grandmother's pearl earrings and a gold locket with a tiny photograph of me as a baby. I'd left them behind in my hasty departure all those years ago. I stared at these artifacts from another life, turning the locket over in my hands, remembering how my grandmother had slipped it around my neck on my 10th birthday, telling me I came from a long line of strong women. I never acknowledged receiving the package. But that night, I added a significant anonymous donation to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from Somerville, enough to fund 20 full 4-year scholarships. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying what hurt you, but creating something better in its place. The abandoned girl with $75 had become a woman worth billions, not just in financial terms, but in the resilience and determination that no one could ever take from her again. I'd learned that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who believe in you when you have nothing to offer but potential and grit. Every year on the anniversary of the day I left home, I have dinner at Reggie's Diner. The place is different now, renovated, expanded, with Dante running the kitchen and Luis managing the front of house. But Reggie still mans the grill sometimes, his hands as steady as ever despite his advancing age. He never took credit for the anonymous investment that saved his business during the pandemic, but he did name a sandwich after me, the Phoenix, spicy and complex, guaranteed to leave an impression. Still hustling, he asks each year when I take my usual booth. Always, I reply, and we share a smile that contains an entire history. I never returned to Somerville. But I did build something that couldn't be taken away, a life entirely of my own making, shaped by both the wounds of betrayal and the victories that followed. In business, they call me ruthless, calculating, unsentimental. But those who truly know me understand. I simply learned early on to value myself when others didn't, to see possibility where others saw limitations, and to build my own future when the one I'd planned was stolen from me. Some people spend their lives trying to get back what they've lost. I chose instead to create something new, something stronger, more valuable, and entirely mine. Not a replacement for what was taken, but a testament to what remains when everything else is stripped away, the unyielding determination to become someone no one could ignore or forget. They may have taken my college fund, but they gave me something far more valuable in return, the hunger that comes from having nothing to lose, and the freedom that comes from having no one to please but yourself. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was the one I'd built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, choice by choice. And that, in the end, was worth so much more.